Climate change is obviously going to affect the whole world, and there are major impacts for every country. Australia is particularly vulnerable because a lot of the country is arid and doesn't have high rainfalls already. That's particularly in the central and southern regions. And in the north we have the wet tropics that are going to be affected. And there are a few factors that are really concerning for Australia, and one of them is most of our population live in low-lying coastal communities. All our major cities are on the coast, and they're going to be more susceptible to sea level rises, storm surges, inundations, and those sorts of problems that come with climate change. The second area where it's going to be a problem is fresh water supply, because as temperatures increase, as rainfall is reduced, we're going to have less freshwater availability. And already, just with the last drought that we're coming out of, we've had water restrictions in all the major east coast cities of Australia, including Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide. They've all been under water restrictions because we haven't had decent rainfall for many years. The third thing that's going to impact on Australia is agricultural production. We're a major producer of food and agricultural commodities, and as rainfall patterns shift, that can impact negatively on the crops we can grow and the amount we can produce, so that will affect our exports and our economy as well, so it'll be a significant impact for us. And I suppose the fourth area is one of the big things for Queensland is that tourism, and particularly tourism for the Great Barrier Reef, is really important now. As sea level temperatures rise, as the acidity of the water changes with climate change, a lot of the reef is going to be bleached, some of it will die. So that means that that reef supports approximately $6 billion in ecotourism. That won't be there if the reef is killed off by climate change by the middle of the century. So there are all those factors we've got to take into account as well. The reef also provides an important nursery for a lot of the fishing industry in this state. So if it goes, it means there's less catch for the fishing industry, so there's less money there are fewer jobs and so forth. So Australia is particularly vulnerable to climate change, and for all those reasons we should be particularly concerned about it. Well, in terms of climate change, first of all, over the next 10 years, the kinds of things we've been seeing in the last 10 years are going to continue to happen. So we would expect there to be more bushfires, there could be more droughts, there could be more extreme weather events, storms and so forth due to climate change. We'll really start to see more of those impacts towards the middle of the century. In terms of Australia needing to do something, or needing to reduce its emissions and also be part of the global response where the world reduces its greenhouse gas emissions, it's really important because we need to significantly reduce emissions, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is suggesting that really to stop runaway global warming, where we get these feedback loops where lots of methane is released from the thawing of the permafrost or ice shelves melting in the Arctic and Antarctic. In order to avoid that, we need to keep greenhouse gases below about 450 parts per million. And in order to do that, the world would have to cut its emissions by something like 80% by 2050. He's probably looking at 25 to 30% by 2020. So there's going to have to be some pretty substantial changes to the way countries around the world, including Australia, do business, the way they run their economies. They're going to have to become cleaner and greener. They're going to have to reduce their emissions in order to avoid those kind of catastrophic problems that we would face at the end of the century if global warming kicks into these feedback loops. The biggest pollution for climate change is generally the burning of fossil fuels for energy, so petrol and diesel and natural gas. Those things that we burn to produce electricity, those things we use to power our vehicles, those are the biggest single emitters. There are also other things, things like methane leaking from landfills, where we dump things. That's an important source of greenhouse gases. And there are land management practices. Cutting down forests reduces their ability to absorb CO2 and releases methane and carbon that's been in the soil. into the atmosphere. Over-tilling soil tends to release carbon dioxide as well and methane. So there are lots of different sources, but the majority of them are burning of fossil fuels and land management practices are really the two big ones when we come to greenhouse gas emissions. There are two different things. There's the thinning of the ozone layer due to ozone-depleting substances like CFCs, and then there's climate change. They are separate issues, but there are a couple of linkages between them. Some people get confused by them, but basically ozone-depleting substances like CFCs are also greenhouse gases. So releasing those is a bad idea because not only does it destroy the ozone layer, but it also absorbs heat and it contributes to greenhouse effect that way. But there was an odd linkage as well in that it's been discovered that over the Antarctic, where the ozone hole is thinnest, where the ozone is thinnest, there's been some cooling, and the thinning of the ozone layer has led to more air movements going across the Antarctic and keeping cooler the outer fringes of the ice sheets. And so the Antarctic isn't actually shrinking as much as the Arctic is because of that effect. So as the ozone hole repairs itself, that effect will change and the Antarctic will start to shrink faster. So there is a link between the two, but ozone depletion is a different issue from climate change.